Loki, the accursed prince of Elbaf, the self-proclaimed god who has the giants fearing him. The man prophesies to destroy the world. Ever since Luffy awakened, the community has asked itself whether there's anyone who could give Luffy the same kind of fight Kaido did. While Loki isn't fighting him yet, he could be the next big powerhouse the Straw Hats meet. Loki, born as an ancient giant, with eyes that terrified everyone. As a baby, no other giant was able to hold him back. Rejected by the world, having never felt loved, he grew up terrorizing his country, a nation with a history of producing warriors. As time passed, the world produced even stronger fighters, especially since rocks came into existence, a man Loki looked up to, and a man his father, Harold, contended with. Now he confronts the devil that brings downfall upon Elbaf with his godly fruit and weapon. With such a story, where does the Prince of Elbaf stand relative to the rest of the One Piece world? Ever since Elbaf started, Oda changed the status quo of who the high tiers currently are and decided to show us higher levels of might unseen before. Not just concerning the old generation, but up to godlike characters. Since Oda isn't finished with Loki and Elbaf, we can't definitively put Loki in a camp. This video, instead of presenting things as concrete like I did in my prior videos, will present levels of power and the arguments for why he could be that strong. At the end, I'll explain what I think the best case for him is. The levels are Commander class, Apex class, Strongest currently, Pirate King, and God tier. Level 1, Commander class. When Luffy searched for the keys to free Loki, he met the legendary mountain eater Gaban. Gaban explains that only Shanks was ever able to beat him, and that version of Shanks isn't on the same level as the current one. To make sure someone would be able to handle Loki, Gaban tests Luffy to see if he's worthy of keeping Loki at bay. His transformation into Gear 5 was confirmation enough. Luffy didn't even use any meaningful attack, he just tried to grab the keys. And let's not forget, Gaban has seen Loki and can sense Shanks' power. He, more than anyone, should know the level of power needed to defeat Loki. Through his tests and his account, we can see that while you do need a prominent fighter to beat him, the top of the current world can get the job done. Level 2, Apex class. Gaban says that prior to Shanks halting him, no one else could defeat him. While the statement is a bit hyperbolic, it should at the very least include Gaban himself. A more youthful and active version of him saw no chance of beating Loki. Quick correction, Gaban saw no chance of beating Holy Knight Harold and only thought Loki could beat him. The overall point still stands, but this is more precise. Gaban, the left wing of the Pirate King. Even in his old age, he made Luffy and Zoro wary of him, despite them having faced Kaido and demonic beings before. If you asked him, he'd rank as the second strongest of the Roger pirates behind Roger himself. Now, that was probably a more playful answer, but the way Oda constructed the Roger pirates, it's narratively the case that Rayleigh and Gaban are equals. The same Rayleigh who put fear into Blackbeard, the same Rayleigh who was able to contend with Kizaru, a remarkable admiral, the same Kizaru who was heavily mentally nerfed when he shredded Gear 4 Luffy and traded blows with Gear 5 Luffy. And these feats come from their old retired years. Gaban thought Loki was unstoppable back when he was a more prime version of himself. A fighter who'd be a worthy Yonko candidate if he wanted the title. If you want to push the Rayleigh-Gaban narrative further, you could say that Odin was part of the Roger Pirates and these two rank above him, the same Odin who was significant in power in Kaido's eyes. You decide. Level 3, Strongest currently. Moving from Gaban's words to Loki putting those words into action, we see that Loki's performance isn't just impressive, it's damn near beyond our expectations. Even before being released, Luffy tried to punch Loki in Gear 4. Loki, chained up, managed to dodge and angered Luffy. Sure, Luffy didn't use Conqueror's coating, but Loki dodging that is not something to underestimate. When Luffy himself got chained up, in chains less restrictive than Loki's, he was way too weak to use Haki. For comparison, in the filler episodes, random marine fodder and the Kung Fu Dugong can use it. And if you don't want to acknowledge filler, people like Tashigi or Smoker can use Haki. Being so weakened that you can't use it at all puts Luffy in that moment below the likes of these characters. Loki, being far more heavily chained, should have an even bigger debuff, yet he still managed to dodge gear for Luffy. And it isn't just physicality. Loki seems to have future sight, reading movements before they happen, the same advanced observation haki that only the top of the top can access. Pair that with the fact that he wields Conqueror's Haki and you're not looking at a brute, you're looking at a complete fighter with the full package the world's elite are defined by. Now, something that would firmly establish Loki as the strongest warrior currently is his first true fight. When Imo appeared on Elbaf in the form of Gunko, Loki was able to beat her back with a flash freeze from Ratatoska. Gunko Imo is a warrior no top tier has scaled to as of yet, and no top tier has been able to replicate a feat like this. Level 4, Pirate King. Looking into Loki's past, we know he managed to beat Holy Knight Herald. Now, you could argue he only managed to kill him because he let him. Sure, maybe Herald holding back was what gave Loki the opening to defeat him, but it's clear Loki is on his level, or maybe slightly above. Herald himself, a man who considered himself unstoppable, believed that only Loki with the Devil Fruit could beat him, and even before Loki got the fruit, he was already able to hold Herald off. Then, once he ate it, he briefly overpowered him outright. Now, why is that important? Because Herald is the same man who went toe-to-toe with Zebek. He fought and managed to keep up with him, and Zebek, in his time, was the strongest. After his death, Herald received a covenant from Imo, and by his own words, gained immense strength. So he went from being equal to the strongest to gaining even more power and abilities on top of that. Imo himself was shocked that anyone could defeat such a monster. With these points, you have enough of a case to say Loki should be considered part of the Pirate King era. But let's say you believe Roger's era is so strong that every Roger level rival would not only defeat Herald, but stand a tier above him. Is there anything else to judge Loki on? If Loki had merely beaten Imo through Gunko's body, there wouldn't be much to discuss. But as fate would have it, Imo arrived in person and caused Elbaf's downfall personally. Now, before continuing, I want to make it clear that Loki does not scale to Imo here, at least not when Imo is serious or at full power. Still, there's something that needs to be said. When Imo arrived on Elbaf, Gaban stated that he had never felt such haki. This means Imo's presence is the strongest thing he has ever sensed. And no, that doesn't just mean it's a dark or malicious presence, because Imo had already been acting through Gunko. If it were only an ominous aura, Gaban would have said something earlier. This was the strongest being he'd ever felt, and that would include Dummy Reverse Zebek, the strongest opponent Roger ever fought. When Loki faced Imo, he powered through his attack and landed a hit. Looking at the state of his body and how exhausted he was afterward, it's clear he took damage in return. This matters because of what happened at God Valley. When Roger and Gob fought Dummy Reverse Zebek, they explained that even though they landed attacks on rocks, none of it was meaningful. They had to overcome his Conqueror's Haki defense to deal real damage, which they only managed by combining their strength. So Loki being able to damage Imo, even if it wasn't much, means he got past that initial defense. It means he overcame the Haki defense of a being whose Haki Gaban calls the strongest he has ever felt. With all of this combined, he has shown things that no current top tier was able to do and rivals the old generation at their peak. Level 5, God tier. With his current feats and the narrative that Elbaf citizens portray, is there anything else that could push Loki even higher? Indeed, there is. Throughout this saga, every time people talk about Loki, they compare him to Sun God Nika. During their class, the kids couldn't agree on who was scarier, Nika or Loki. When Rewrote spoke about the devil fruit, he explained how, depending on the user, you could maximize its potential. And since Loki is an ancient giant, he's exactly the kind of user who can push that fruit to its limit. And remember, this is Nidhogger, the largest dragon of them all. Not only that, but one legend says the warrior who ate the Nidhogger fruit and wielded Ratatoska as a weapon was a rival to Sun God Nika himself. All these legends combined could place Loki in the very same category. But the strongest side isn't just a legend, it's on the page. When Emu unleashed Dummy Reversi, Loki resisted it. Emu, treating that resistance as noteworthy, tells you it isn't something just anyone can do. Whether you credit it to his haki or the nature of his mythical zone, the fact remains, he stood against the ability of a god and didn't fold. That's not the resume of a top tier, that's the resume of someone brushing against the divine. After presenting all 5 levels, here's my take on which one is currently the most likely. As much as Loki is a heavy hitter, his clash with Emu shows he isn't on the same caliber as a god. His ability to fight on that level depends on the old Elbaf legends being true, and even if they are, that doesn't mean Loki is the same warrior as the one in the legend. So while he isn't quite that strong, he definitely isn't as weak as someone in Commander class either. When Emu himself appeared on Elbaf, we saw clear as day that no one there was even worth Emu's attention, not even Zoro or Sanji. But when he confronted Loki, he didn't dispose of him the way he did the rest. Now, to the remaining 3 levels. We're now in territory that, in my opinion, is all valid. Starting with the Apex class. I think this is the bare minimum for where he should be. Like I said earlier, Loki's narrative and feats dictate that he's beyond someone like Gaban, the same Gaban who is part of that Apex class, even if you consider him on the lower end of it. Gaban also says only someone like Shanks could beat Loki and was impressed solely by Luffy going Gear 5. There's nothing debunking that placement, but it's also nothing to praise too much, especially since ever since Wano we've been constantly confronted with these levels. No, the interesting part is the higher interpretations. Now before continuing to the strongest of today class, there's one major thing that needs to be answered. Is Loki below Shanks or not? To be honest, there's no clear answer. If you take Gaban's words at face value, it does seem Shanks is someone who beat him. That's a valid case, but for me, there are too many odd things about taking Gaban's account head on. When Gaban warns about danger Loki possesses, he emphasizes what a dangerous person he is. Loki may not be a cuddle bear, but the thrust of Gaban's words is that Loki is someone who would bring about the end of the world. Knowing what we know about Loki, we can see Gaban's words weren't completely accurate, and that raises the question of just how reliable the rest of his account is. Not only that, but the tale of how Loki was captured may not be complete as Gaban tells it. One of the giants explains that when Loki tried to escape his punishment, it took all the warriors of Elbaf to hold him back. In simple terms, we don't actually know how or even if Shanks defeated him. Maybe he beat him in a fair fight. Maybe Elbaf, Gaban and Shanks brought him down together. Maybe they had a strategy Loki couldn't overcome all at once. The point is, we don't know. You can think Shanks is a worthy opponent for him, but personally, I wouldn't confine Loki to that level as of now. To him being the strongest man alive, this is where it gets interesting. The manner in which Loki fought Emu is telling. When he faced Emu in the blob form, he had help from Luffy and the two dismantled him fairly easily. to the point where Imu looked like Swiss cheese. Now to be fair, in that form Imu seems to have no tangibility and offers nothing impressive to scale off. But here's the interesting part. Loki managed to get the upper hand with Ratatoska and Imu did nothing to counter it. That move would probably put any current top tier in a freeze, and as of now, no one has a real answer to it. No one has shown they could handle that sort of attack. It's a win condition nobody else currently has. Now to level 4. Is he hanging in there with Whitebeard, Roger and Garp? If you saw my Rocks vs Roger video, you'd know I personally believe Rocks is stronger than Roger, and Loki, being clearly above that level, wouldn't just beat Roger, but might stand a tier above him. But for this video, let's go with the interpretation that Roger is a Whitebeard equal to the fullest extent. Even then, the fact that Loki scales to Holy Knight Herald, a character Imu himself calls a monster, would still put him on the Pirate King tier. You know what? Let's go even further beyond with Roger and the Pirate King tier. Let's say Whitebeard, as the strongest man alive, would be a tier above Holy Knight Herald and by extension above the Loki of the past. Even then, Loki still has a case to be in that conversation. Remember, Loki damaged Imu, and at that point Imu was furious, more rampaged up than before, and even before getting angry, Imu was already the strongest thing Gabon had ever sensed. For Loki to damage him means he surpassed Imu's Haki defense, a defense sitting 2 levels above the strongest thing Gabon ever felt. Call it tears if you want, but it's something no old gen fighter managed or even has an argument for. And even if you want to claim Roger could bypass Imu's Haki defense too, that he'd be a full tier above would be pure assumption. Honestly, the only thing holding me back from placing Loki firmly in those levels is the possibility that Oda wants to keep the old generation as a bar for the current generation to surpass, even if Luffy eventually surpasses Loki. But for now, there's nothing in the narrative restricting Loki below the old generation. So, what's the conclusion? Currently you can view Loki as a Pirate King tier threat for now, though that might change in the future. The safest and lowest placement for him is standing side by side with the likes of Luffy.